Yeah, you can hear. Hi, Kaylee-Ann. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, doll.
So good to see you guys.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if I should bring my phone in there.
In where?
In there and turn and join.
Yeah, if you want to, sure. So anyway, yeah, is anybody familiar with the story of when Jacob wrestled with God or
Yes.
an angel of God? Yes, you are, Elizabeth?
Yes,
So
I am.
I'll read the account for those that aren't. It says, that night Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip so that his hip was wrenched, and he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. The man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel." That's where the nation of Israel came from. "Because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Then Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" And then he blessed him there. He wouldn't tell him his name. So that's why we don't know for sure, who this was. But then Jacob said, so Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." The sun rose above. The sun above him. The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. So that was kind of an interesting story. Nobody really knows for sure. It describes him as a man, and then it describes him as God or a God-man. Quite often, angels are referred to as sons of God. So it's very likely this was an angel or, whatever. And that's the other thing we talked about last week too, was some encounters with angels, some other encounters. So I want to talk a bit about the nature of angels. Linda's joining from the kitchen now. Angels are an entirely different order of beings than humans. They are created beings like we are, with greater knowledge than us, because they don't know everything like God does, but because they've existed since the beginning of time, they don't need a history lesson because they've been there, done that. They've, were alive during every historical event on Earth up until now. And they were created at the beginning of time. I think we talked about that last week. Therefore, they know how others have acted and reacted in situations, and can predict with a greater degree of accuracy how we may act in similar situations. So it's given them, some insight into people who are alive today based on, how people have acted and interacted in the past. Human beings do not become angels after they die, and angels will never have never been and never will be human beings. Angels are personal spiritual beings who have intelligence, emotion, will. They have a free will. That's why there's fallen angels, because they chose to rebel against God. They can, to a certain degree, take on human form. We talked about that last week a little bit too. Humans are primarily physical beings with a spiritual aspect to them, but angels are like the other way around. They're spiritual beings. They have like a physical aspect to them. They can, like I said, take on human form. So the greatest thing that we can learn from angels is their instant, unquestionable obedience to God and to God's command. They're magnificent beings, but they do whatever God says. So if they can follow God and do what God says, then so can we. That's the other thing with humans. We tend to, want to do things our own way instead of God's way, which is one thing I can say that the angels have over us. The Bible warns us against the worship of angels. There's a couple verses here I put in just to illustrate that. In Colossians, it says, "Do not let anyone who delights in false humility and the worship of angels disqualify you. Such a person also goes into great detail about what they have seen. They are puffed up with idle notions by their unspiritual mind." And then in Revelation, it says, John, who saw an angel, said, "I, John, am one who heard and saw these things. After that, I fell down to worship at the feet of the angel. He is the one who had been showing me these things. But he said to me, 'Don't do that. I serve God just as you do. I am God's servant, just like the other prophets. I serve God along with all who obey the words of this book. Worship God.'" So angels are really, you could say, kind of equal to humans. They're not beings that we should worship, even though they're heavenly beings, but they're created beings just like we are. And in some ways, they're there to serve us. So they're really not over us. They're servants of us. So they're not, to be worshipped by us. Hi, Elizabeth. Come say hi to everybody. One of my other grandchildren running around here. So the main role of angels, their primary role is to worship God 24/7. They're also messengers. They're guides, protectors, providers. They provided food to Hagar, Elijah, and for Jesus after his temptation in the desert. They're deliverers. They freed Paul from prison in Acts chapter 5, and Peter in Acts chapter 12. They strengthen and encourage us. They answer our prayer. There also can be executioners, but they can't take a life without God's authority. They can only take a life if God says, go for it. For example, the angel of death in the time of Moses at the Exodus, when there was the angel of death passed over all the homes in Exodus, and the firstborn of every household in Egypt died. But the people of God put the blood on the doorposts, and their children were spared, and that was something God authorized. But so that's really one of the only examples of the angel of, like, an angel of death, but they do exist. And then a little bit about, I only have one slide to talk about the nature of demons. They're fallen angels. We talked about that last week. Revelation 12:9 says, "The great dragon was thrown down to the earth, and his angels with him. The dragon is that old serpent called the devil, or Satan. He leads the whole world astray." And I could show you other verses too, similar to that, but I think it's kind of interesting. Like, I find that from what I've studied, that the only real power that demons have, or that Satan has, because like I said before, Satan can't take a life or create life. They can't take life without God's say so, like in the example with Job. But his only real power is a lie. So if he can get us to believe a lie, then he can manipulate us, and he can get us to do things that we wouldn't normally do, like take our own lives. And I think that's his greatest power today, and for years. If he can make a person feel stupid or no good or unworthy, or feel bad about themselves, and there's so many people today that feel that way. They just feel like they're worthless or no good, and people that cut themselves or commit suicide. So I think that's like his only real power, is to make us believe something about ourselves that isn't true. And
doesn't that also work in the sense of Satan being able to promote a false god like money, so that it draws people away from God? I mean, it doesn't have to be just hurting yourself. obviously hurting yourself. He's so subtle.
Yes, you're absolutely right. He can, at the very least, distract us from God with things like, worldly things like money, uh, sex, power, material things. I think all those things are ways I, I call it like keeping us on the merry-go-round. Like there's been times in my life where I feel like, the devil is like distracting me from God. And I feel like, he's got me on this merry-go-round and I'm just going in circles. And anytime I sort of like start to wake up and want to get off of the merry-go-round, he like comes back and tries to distract me and keep me on it, So that's sort of the image I get in my head, of what he does just to keep me away from God's best for my life. So
I
absolutely.
see it in our country, in that, the country was founded on religious freedom and on God. And now that's about the last thing anybody's thinking about.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, there's so much division in our country. And, there's also, like, it really disheartens me, but, like, the way Christians are divided, too, is just, and distracted, distracted from sort of the pure, like a pure relationship with God. I find it very, very disheartening. But say more about that, Elizabeth. What do you like?
I totally agree with you. I was just talking about the other aspects of Satan, like he makes money God to some people so that he pulls it away, or somehow religion is distorted through him. The word gets distorted.
Yes, exactly. And I think Satan uses religion too. Like, if somebody wants to follow God, I think he can cloud our relationship with God by giving us religion. He says, okay, you want to serve God, and then he throws out all these legalistic things at us, and you got to get this right, and you got to get that right, you got to get that right, and you got to jump through these hoops, and you got to get on this merry-go-round, and yeah, exactly. I agree with you totally. I've heard it said before that his primary, motivation is jealousy, because Satan rebelled against God. Remember how Satan wanted to be like God, but he didn't have all the same power that God had, because God had the power to create life and also the power to end life if he so choose, but Satan didn't have that power. So I've heard it said that he was jealous of the creation, which is us, and so what he couldn't create, he steals instead. And what he can't steal, he tries to destroy. And that's why I love the verse in John 10:10. And I don't have it written here, but I can quote it because I have it memorized. Jesus said, the thief, and by the thief he means the devil, has come only to steal, to kill, and to destroy. He said, but I have come that they might have life and have it to the full. And I just love that verse because, I would read that before and it'd be like, okay, yeah, I get that. But I didn't really know the fullness of that verse until I experienced what that really means, like life to the full. Like I had a Holy Spirit experience where I just felt so alive, like just incredibly alive. And this verse came to my mind right away, and I thought, oh, this is what that verse means about, Jesus coming to give us life to the full. I didn't even know what that meant, what life to the full meant until I experienced it. But when my little granddaughter just tripped over my computer cord here. But when the devil's got us on the ropes and got us on that merry-go-round, our lives are just, it doesn't feel like that. We just go day to day with anxiety and worry and cares and, about money and about relationships and about, every little thing. And that's another way he can kind of keep us distracted too from our relationship with God, is by, just general worries and cares of life. Don't you think?
It's
Yeah.
it's an interesting concept to think that, like, especially from the earlier passage that we were reading and whatnot, about how, if, like, angels are not supposed to be looked at so much as a step above us, but rather so that they work for us, and that we were both created. So in that mindset, if I feel like it's probably just a huge misconception from, like, if it's, how do I put this into words? It's interesting that something that was created the same way is jealous of something else that was created, if there was no difference within that creation. I think it's more of like a favorite child kind of thing.
Yeah, maybe. I think you're right. I think you're right. I think that, I've read things like that too, where, the Satan was jealous of God's relationship with us, and that was part of it.
Dan's question?
No, I didn't. Hold on.
The chat.
Uh,
I didn't even know there was a chat on this. This is the first time I've used it.
what's it say? I don't know how to get to it.
Also, because Satan thought angels were above humans, and therefore creating conflict with what God wanted the angels and being a protector to humans.
Okay, I think I have to read. I don't follow. I'll have to read it myself, I think.
Maybe Kayleen can explain herself out loud.
Yeah.
I believe she's in a additional chat, so she may have her mic muted at the point, which is why she texted. So it might take her a bit.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, she is on another chat.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think what she means.
Oh, okay. I don't know yeah. So I think I'm just thinking, like, I don't know. I've heard other stories too of, like, angels thinking humans, they're very simple-minded. We poop, we pee, like, and we have to, and they have to kind of, like, they're these beings, created the beginning of time and have all this knowledge and power.
Uh-huh.
So I guess part of me I haven't heard of this story, but another story of kind of, like, to have God tell you, like, you have to protect them and, like, they are your equal. Like, and then, having Satan be like, how are they my equal when I can do all this and I can live forever and I don't have death? So that's kind of one story. I don't know if anyone's heard of that, but that's kind of where that break came as well, of, like, fallen angels.
Yeah, I've never actually read anything or heard anything about angels sort of looking down on us as inferior, I don't know if I agree with that, but I suppose that's possible, but I don't think that would even be in their nature, to think that way.
But isn't Kellyanne saying it's the fallen angels that think that way because they're able to lure us?
Yeah. But that would be more a contempt for humanity, wouldn't it? Like the fallen angels? Like more of a jealousy and a contempt for us.
Yeah, that's kind of more of what I think I've heard of a story like that. If I find it, I can try to send it to you.
Yeah, I'd be interested in reading that. That would be really cool. They can take possession of a physical body. Yesterday, or not yesterday, last 2 weeks ago now. I keep saying last week, but it was 2 weeks ago. I was mentioning that I witnessed a real live exorcism where the guy was, possessed by, actually he was possessed by 9 demons, because the guy that was, the guy that was like praying over him to deliver him, I could actually hear each time a demon came out of him, I could hear it, like, and he would make violent vomiting sounds each time a demon came out. And by the time it was done, like after the 9th one came out, the guy was just like weak as a kitten. He was just laying there on the floor, almost like he was drunk. He was happy and cheerful, and he was weak. The guys had to pick him up and carry him and put him into bed. But like before that, he had superhuman strength. Like I said, he was like he was a little guy, but we had eight guys that couldn't hold him down because he was like superhuman. But it was really freaky. Now I believe, and I believe this to be true, that if you're a follower of Christ, or you have God's Spirit within you, that you cannot be possessed by a demon, because the Holy Spirit and a demon can't occupy the same space, the same soul. But I do believe, though, that as a Christian, you can be not possessed, but you can be oppressed. I don't know if you know what oppressed means, but you can be kind of, lied to, not sort of tormented in a way, like bothered by demons, like kind of harassed, I guess you could say, harassed by demons, but they can't like control you. They can't possess you. Like I've never heard of that happening, like somebody who's, a follower of Christ.
I think instead of possession, but they actually though make you do things. It creates doubt in yourself and in your own psyche, and that's what causes the issues.
Right. Yeah, they can play with your head if you let them. But that's the thing, like we have a choice as people of faith. We have a choice to follow God on faith and believe everything he says, that we're loved, that we're forgiven, that, he died for us, that he just cares for us. He's got a picture of us in his wallet. Like we could believe all those things, about a relationship with God. Or we can, choose to believe negative things about ourselves, and believe lies from the enemy. And, sometimes it's hard. Like if, I've dealt with people who grew up in abusive backgrounds and, were abused sexually or physically or mentally and emotionally. And they might have a relationship with God through Christ, but they still believe lies about themselves. They still haven't been, I guess, mentally set free from all the things they believe since a young age. And that's a hard thing to deal with sometimes, If you've had things instilled in you from a young age, if you're told, you're stupid, you're no good, you're never going to amount to anything, and you're told that from a young age, it's not just an easy thing to just sort of ignore that and believe something different, because those things are kind of ingrained in you. But I do believe God can and will help you get free of those things. There's a book I was talking with somebody about recently, called The Bondage Breaker by Neil Anderson, and he talks about those very things. Let me tell you the subtitle of the book, actually, because hold on, I'm going to look it up real quick on Amazon. Bear with me. Amazon shopping. The book's been around for a while, but it just came out again in a recent updated version. And it's still just applicable today as it was when it was originally written. The Bondage Breaker. And it's written by Neil Anderson. And the tagline, hold on, let me find it here. So the tagline is, oh, my internet's slow. Negative thought, sorry, hang on. Overcoming negative thoughts, irrational feelings, and habitual sin. So, yeah, pretty good, huh? And it does talk about, it does talk a lot about the way, demonic forces work in our lives to keep us believing those negative thoughts and feeling those irrational feelings and committing those habitual sins. So I do recommend it. It's, just got recently revised. It's like one of those over 2 million sold worldwide. So it's a really good book. Anyway. So this is something Elizabeth mentioned 2 weeks ago, and I think it's really important, and I didn't want to neglect it, but this verse she quoted from Ephesians 6, verse 12. It says, "For our struggle And let me pause there for a second. When it says struggle, I believe this could be a physical struggle, a mental struggle, an emotional struggle, or a spiritual struggle. It could be any of those. So our struggle, whatever that struggle is not against flesh and blood. Because sometimes when we struggle with things, we only think of it as a struggle with the things in this realm that we can see, correct? The obvious things, the abusive father that we had, or abusive uncle or whatever, or our financial situation being in the toilet or whatever it might be. It says, for our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. That's pretty powerful, right? When you think about it, there are beings at work that are tied to everything in this world. So it's not one or the other. Remember I said I used to talk to people that were Satanists, and they said, and I believe it's true, that nothing in this world would exist if it wasn't for that heavenly realm, those angels and demons, that they're all around us at all times, and that nothing, even this computer sitting in front of me or this couch I'm sitting on, would exist if it wasn't for their world. So their world is tied to our world, and our world is tied to theirs. So to me, it makes sense that nothing that we struggle with in this world is not affected by things in their world. So now the danger here, and a lot of Christians will make this mistake, the danger is to focus on just one or the other. So sometimes we'll just look at it as a physical struggle and not look at the spiritual aspects of what's going on. But then there are Christians who are into, they call it spiritual warfare, and all they focus on is the spiritual things. So they spiritualize every struggle in their lives. So if they struggle with, let's say, lack of money, let's say, or fear, what they'll do is they'll pray against the demons of fear. So they'll say, demons of fear, I bind you in the name of Jesus Christ, because they think it's just all a spiritual battle. And that's a mistake too, I believe. I think that our struggle, that is everything in the physical world, yes, that is tied to the spiritual world, but I think you have to look at both. And that's one of the things that Neil Anderson addresses in his book. He looks at, emotional things, he looks at mental things, but he looks at how all those spiritual things are tied to it. And you can't ignore those things, because if you do, you're going to struggle your whole life and never get free of the physical things if you ignore the spiritual things. But then, sometimes if you ignore all the physical things and just focus on the spiritual, you sort of, kind of sell short. It's almost like you're in a just spiritual denial in a way of all the things that are in the physical world that are affecting you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Right. I think if you put the two together, it can be quite powerful to recognize and address the spiritual things that may be at work behind the scenes in places you can't see with everything you struggle with in the physical world. And it shouldn't be ignored. But spiritual warfare, though, and then the other danger I've seen with some Christians who get too caught up in what they call spiritual warfare is that they're too focused on the evil forces. They get off track with focusing on God, and God really has dominion over everything. So we can't be too caught up with constantly focusing on all the evil things, because then we tend to ignore the power of God in our lives. And that's where we really need to rest and put our faith, So it's almost like you don't want to give the demons the time of day because they don't deserve it. You know what I mean?
That's a really good point. I never looked at it like that. I've always known that the balance is important, is to understand where do you focus, and the things that we have to do ourselves here in this world. But the reality is when I have seen people who completely focus on the spirit of the enemy or whatever, again, of the evil piece, they really do seem to not, I don't know, accept the fact that you need to work on things yourself as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it really what it becomes, and I've seen this happen, and I could say I've been guilty of it myself. It almost becomes a matter of pride. It's like, well, I'm a child of God, I'm a Christian, and Christ has given me authority over the devil and all his demons, so I'm just going to come against them, and pray against all these demons, and it becomes almost like a matter of pride instead of humility, and instead of being surrendered to God, it's almost like you're trying to be a little God yourself and tackle all these demons. And the reason I say that is because that was one of the things that experience of that demon possession taught me, because I was like at that time really into spiritual warfare, and I was reading this book called Hostage to the Devil, and I was sort of into that. But when I saw it with my own eyes in real life, I'm like, okay, this is not something you want to mess with. This is not something you want to go after. It's not something you don't want to put on your Christian, what do you call it, high hat and start chasing after demons. I mean, if it comes your way and you have to deal with it, then deal with it, But it's not something there should be a matter of pride that you go after, because it's if you're dealing with it in pride and not humility, the demons are going to mess with your head and you're not going to win. I saw that happen too. Like that man I told you that was demon possessed. Remember how I said when they leave a host, they roam the earth and they look, like the Bible talks about this. It says they roam the earth and they look for a place to rest. And if they don't find any place to rest, they'll go back to the original host. And if the original host has not sort of cleaned their heart, like they haven't swept the house clean, so to speak, the way the Bible phrases it, then they'll repossess that original host. And that's exactly what happened to this guy. After he was delivered from these 9 demons, it was about 3 days later, and I was working, and he said to me, because remember I told you he was involved in a satanic cult in California? And he says he could literally feel the people in the satanic cult praying demons against him. And he was listening to this like heavy metal music, and he was wanting to do the things in the song that were in this heavy metal music. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe you should stop listening to that. And so in other words, he didn't sweep the house clean after he got delivered. And it didn't happen that night, but the very next night, I was not working, but I heard about it the next day, and he had another attack. And the guy that had done the exorcism wasn't there that night. And once again, the guys that were in the building tried to hold him down, and they couldn't subdue him, and he was like, superhuman again. And this one young Christian guy who was really into the spiritual warfare thing, but he wasn't doing it with the right motive and the right heart, and he didn't really have a very strong faith, but he acted like he did, but he wasn't very mature in his faith. But anyway, he tried to pray the demons out of him, and so he started like praying with the guy, like praying over the guy and saying demons be gone or whatever in the name of Jesus. And the guy looked at him and in a very evil voice, a voice that wasn't his own, just glared him in the eye and said, "You're nothing," or whatever, something along that line. Just said, "You're nothing." And the guy got intimidated and he backed right off. He got scared, and he called the police, and the police came and took him away. But and then that's when I mentioned that years later, I think it was about a year or two later, he came back with 2 broken legs. Oh, it wasn't even that long. It was like 8 months. And he said he'd gone to California to break ties with the satanic cult, and they let him go, but they said, we have to break both your legs, though. We're not going to let you go for free. But, yeah, it was, wow. Anyway, But this verse here is really important for us, I think, to hold on to. In 1 John 4, chapter 4, verse 4, it says, "Dear children, you belong to God. You belong to God. If you haven't given your life to him, you need to. You have not accepted the teachings of the false prophets. That's because the one who is in you is powerful. He is more powerful than the one who is in the world." And who do you think it's referring to when it says the one that is in the world?
Satan.
Yeah.
Satan.
Yeah, he's actually referred to as the God of this world. Another reference, Christ said, "The God of this world has blinded the minds of those that don't believe, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ should shine into them." Sorry, it's King James. I don't know what it says in NIV because I memorized the King James version. But, it refers to Satan in that verse as the God of this world. And you remember when Christ was tempted in the desert by Satan? And Satan, what was one of the things that Satan offered him? Do you remember? Like first he tried to tempt him with food. Go ahead.
Everything he could see below him when he was on the top of the mountain.
Right. Yeah, he said, look at all these things on this earth. He said, if you bow down and worship me, I will give you all these things. So how could Satan give him all the things in this world if he didn't, have them to begin with? So Satan is considered the god of this world, because that's, probably where God banished him to. And the concept of hell, we don't know for sure if it's something that exists right now or if it's reserved for the end of time. But that's, a story for the subject for another day. But he's definitely active in this world today, and we see that quite a bit. But I think that's a very, I always try to think of a sticky point, something to leave with us, to remember. And the only thing I could think of was either too long or it didn't rhyme. But if you could remember that he that is in you is greater than he that is in the world. And if you have to shorten it so you can remember it, just remember he is greater. And that's the good news for us, is that, we don't have to live in fear. We don't have to live in shame or worry or doubt, because he that is in us is greater than he that is in the world. And all the things that we struggle with, just remember that he is greater. He is greater than all those things. And I'm not trying to shame you that if you struggle with something that, there's something wrong with you or that you don't have enough faith. That's not what I'm saying, because I struggle sometimes too. I struggle with worry. I struggle with fear sometimes. But I always try to overcome it by remembering that he that is in me is greater than he that is in the world. And we are overcomers, in Christ. So we don't have to kowtow to fear and worry and doubt and shame and all those things that are very prevalent in our world. I haven't seen the movie yet. Has anybody seen the movie that came out, a Christian movie that came out recently called Overcomer?
I have not.
Yeah, I want to see it. Actually, I was just talking about it with some friends today, and I'm intrigued. I want to watch it now. But it's it's called Overcomer, and I have a feeling it probably has to do with what we're talking about. But I'm going to watch it as soon as possible, and maybe next week I can recommend it or not recommend it, and we can talk a bit about what it's about. So anyway, questions, comments, thoughts?
That you're ready for your dinner.
Yeah, I didn't get my burger. They put my burger beside me, but I was too busy yapping and moving my mouth, so I didn't get my burger.
Thank you for that.
No problem. But if you want to talk, I'll eat my burger while you guys talk.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just going to say, it's interesting how
Here it is.
like what you guys think of that, because it really is something that I've seen. It plays out in so many aspects of our lives. This world really is overcome by some real significant, I don't know, like, I don't want to label it evil.
Oh, Linda, I think you're talking on mute.
Oh, am I? Oh, yeah, I am.
But we could still hear. I could still hear you. That's why I didn't interrupt you.
Okay, cool. All right. So yeah, what I was saying is our world is really, I mean, truly filled with, you know, ugliness. I mean, I won't completely call it evil, although I've seen evil. And I think that's the biggest piece is, you know, trying to make sure what we're doing is we're not only knowing that he is greater, but refocusing on that. You know, whenever I mean, we still are, so many people who are struggling with depression, even just from COVID and being locked in and not being able to socialize and stuff. And people who don't like a Zoom meeting because they don't feel like it's personalized, or what was it? I can't remember. Somebody actually referred to it as when the Muppet Show was on, they had like all the Muppets in these squares, and it reminds them of that. And so they really don't like it. But I just think that a big piece of it is, you know, where do you put your focus when you start to have those struggles? You know, do you put it out to the world, you know, and distract yourself, or, you know, or do you just get with God and try to get your head straight as well as your heart, so they're both together? But and that's what I have to kind of give. But I would love to hear what other people think.
You were going to say something, I think. Or am I putting you on the spot?
Well, I mean, y'all know me. I could talk for days. I just wanted to make sure everybody else had a chance before I started popping off. So.
Yeah, Tom can do an hour-long. You do an hour-long comedy routine on the spot without thinking about it ahead of time.
Hop away.
Well, so one thing that really stuck out to me was the concept of, because we learned about it in the military as well, which, because I mentioned that, I have to throw out a quick disclaimer that anything that I say does not directly reflect the views of the United States Air Force. That being said,
Thank you.
when it came to the physical plane of battling and the spiritual plane of battling, it reminded me a lot of what we learned along with our core values here in the military. It's the concept of the 4 pillars, pretty much, that make us up as a whole. If you're physical, you're mental, you're spiritual. Let's see, physical, mental, spiritual,
Emotional?
and emotional. Yes, thank you so much. And the easiest way to to grasp it for me, I'm a simple man, is that it's almost like when you're building a metaphysical house, and you need the foundation. In order to put that foundation down, you need to have the same size and the same strength pillars. You know, if you can imagine building a house, you want to have good foundation, sturdy, not easily going to be shaken. You're going to need those pillars. So how that correlates to us as people is that if you have somebody like, I'll use myself as an example, put myself on the spot. I would say that if I could physically draw out how my pillars are right now, I would say that slowly but surely they're beginning to kind of equalize. But back in, say, high school or anything like that, I would say that my physical pillar would probably be at the highest, and then from there, very kind of staggered between the mental and emotional and spiritual, because of just everybody, different walks of life, different experiences, and how that builds up. So if you try and build a house thinking, well, I've got this really strong one pillar, it can support the rest, then you're going to it's going to fall like a tower of Jenga blocks because you don't have a truly strong foundation. You can trick yourself into thinking that you do. It's like, oh, well, if I've got one incredibly strong pillar, then why do I need the rest? But it's because of that mindset, which is why a lot of people I see are always falling back into the circle of woe, if you will, where you feel a certain way, and because of that, you think a certain way, and because of that, you do certain things a certain way. And it's a circle that keeps going back and forth. Because you're doing those things, it makes you feel this way. Because you feel this way, you start to think this way. Because you think this way, you start to do these things. And it's kind of like, if you could imagine, along with a foundation, if you can imagine it like a staircase. Now, you can have steps that continue to go straight up. But if you're missing those steps, then you're just going to be stuck. And then you're going to be, well, there's nowhere else to go, so I'm going to turn back around. I'm going to wait for that step to get there. But while you're waiting for somebody to put that step there for you, you have to realize that you along with your your journey for personal growth is what's going to lay the carpentry, if you will, to put those steps up there. And so I think it's more of like, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I feel like people need to come to terms with themselves as far as their foundation. I feel like people are so obsessed with being selfless that they don't realize that being selfish by definition isn't always tied to negative things. And even the word negative isn't always negative, which can sound confusing. I can elaborate on it. But I learned this while I was here in Japan. I decided, like, you know what, this is it. I'm going to take my pride out of the equation. I'm going to start working on my other pillars. So one thing that really struggled for me was mental health. So I decided to use the options that we had on base, and I've been to behavioral health and analysis, like BHOP. I don't know the acronym. But one thing that my counselor told me, which really like blew my mind, it's pretty fun, was the concept of, I guess to try and simplify it, like equilibrium or balance. All of us want to strive to be positive. We want the best version of ourselves. But in order to truly achieve that version of ourselves, we have to be honest with ourselves and acknowledge the fact that there are two sides of everyone. There is a positive and there's a negative. But negative isn't always evil, destructive, corrupt. It's just a part of who you are that also makes up the balance of everything that you do. For every good part of you, there's a part that you probably wish that you didn't always have. The example that she used was, she once had this patient who would talk to her about, whatever have you. Like, she didn't give me any names or anything because of confidentiality, but she would steal things as in her youth. And so she would always deny, like, but I did this back then, but I'm not a robber. I'm not a thief. I'm not a thief. I'm not a thief. And she would just push and deny and deny. And she said, well, you say that you're not a thief, but did you not steal? Is that not what thieves do? And it's like, even if it's that one time or what have you, it's like, like the evidence is there. You stole a thing, therefore you were a thief. But just because you were that thing at that point in time, that doesn't mean that in itself defines you. It's just a negative aspect of your being that you need to come to terms with and be like, okay, there is a part of me that was a thief or is a thief, but those negative aspects should not be pushed away into like a closet with all the rest of the skeletons. And just, if that's the pride,
you can't deny them.
Right. So
back
that's
to
pride.
what Dan was saying relative to, again, we're like, again, those that focus on the evil component, the evil spiritual realm, again, if you focus on it, you've got to admit to it, you have to own it, you have to be real and genuine, but you can't make it your focus so that you can't have any change from that. I think that's.
Can I just give you a quick analogy to go along with what you were saying there, Tom?
Sure.
That I think fits with what you're saying too. In the drug rehab where I used to work, we talked about thought, feeling, and action, and like you said, they're like sort of like the pillars, physical, mental, emotional, and then we didn't really talk. Well, you did talk about the spiritual, but I'll bring that in a minute. But they are equal, like you said, they have to be equal in pillars. But we used to teach them that they have to go in a certain order, like train cars, and thought has to come first on the train, and then feeling second, and then action last. Because if feeling tries to get ahead of thought, you tend to make irrational decisions because your feelings are not always rational. And if you try to put action at the front of the train, you just tend to be impulsive and you just do things without thinking, So, but if you do it thought, feeling, and action, and keep them in that order, like so thought first, then you check with your feelings, and then you take action. But I would put like the God train or the spiritual train at the very beginning, because even though it's like just as important a pillar, they're all just as important if you look at them as pillars. If you look at them in like sort of the order they go in, like I think God should be driving all three of those things, So if I'm surrendered to God and letting Him drive the train, then that's going to drive my thoughts, which consequently will drive my feelings, which consequently will drive my actions. Mm-hmm. If I sort of keep those in balance, or in that order or that balance. But I think it's similar to what you're saying there, Tom, and I just think it kind of goes along with it.
They really are, you can equate each to them. The feelings, the thought is your mental, your feelings, your emotional, and your action is your physical. And again, the only way we can truly be honest is knowing that we can't hide from something. And we hide from other people all the time. You can't hide from God. God knows us good, bad, ugly, and beautiful, and still loves us, and He still, came down to model for us, and He still died for us.
Hold on a second. Can you guys hear her? She's on mute again. Can you hear her though?
I can make out what she's saying. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't want him to miss that, honey. So, Tom can sort of make out what you were saying.
I thought I had taken myself off of mute. I'm sorry. I said that is true. Again, when you look at the physical, well, the thoughts go along with the mental, the feelings go along with the emotional, and the actions go along with the physical. And now I forget exactly what I said, but long and short of it is when we think and feel and act without knowing that there's something that we can hide. Like we can't hide from God. We cannot hide from God. We can hide from other people. We can lie to other people, and they're not going to necessarily know. They could have a gift of discernment, but that doesn't mean that they can catch all of the things that are going on internally. But God knows, and God knows all the good, bad, ugly, and beautiful about us. But the reality is that He still loves us. He still wants what's best for us at all times when we are in relationship with them or with Him. So much so that He came down to model, how do you walk this earth, this world that is, ruled by Satan. But then He also, literally took a hit.
From Jerusalem.
That is the person that is the being that actually and can equate to being genuine. You know, I think that's the biggest thing. And I love that you said that, Tom, because we have to be genuine. We have to be real. We all have faults. We all have, you know, issues. And the more we try to hide them from the world, the more the world has control of us. Versus if we expose them to the light, if we expose them, God knew anyways. And so we can work through them, and we can, again, they're still there, but we don't need to follow what we've done in the past because of fear and because of hiding and what have you. We're just being real. So I love that you said that, Tom.
Look what I have in my head.
I know we're over time, so I'm not sure if others have to go, but good conversations. Elizabeth and Kellyanne, do you have anything to say to us?
Ray,
Like about this?
you were brilliant.
Oh,
What's that? What was brilliant? Excuse me. I didn't quite catch all that.
kind of lagged out for a second there.
There might be a delay. All right, well,
Elizabeth, I think it was Elizabeth, right? We didn't hear what you said, Elizabeth.
I said, Linda, you were brilliant, and Daniel, pray us away.
Pray us away. All right. Thank you, Lord, for each person able to join today. The word that comes to my mind is freedom. I pray for freedom for all of us, freedom over us, freedom from all the powers and authorities that potentially cause havoc in our lives, cause us to believe and feel things that are irrational or wrong. Freedom from the struggles in our lives. I'm not saying that we won't ever struggle with things, Lord, but I mean, we can go through things in life with a sense of freedom, knowing that you're with us, that you're greater than he that is in the world. And then that freedom would drive us, would set the pace for all of our thoughts, feelings, and actions, and that we would know a greater and a deeper realization of your heart and your love today and each day. And then that realization would just drive and affect the way we live our lives and give us greater joy and peace. And I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys. It was so good seeing you.
Tom, if you want to...
Tom, I'm so glad you were able to join us.
If you want to hang out for a little longer.
It was, let's see, what is it? It's 9:40 a.m. now. So I think when I first woke up and saw it, I think it was probably 5:30 in the morning.
What time do you normally wake up for duty?
With these new shifts that we got, it's like zero. Let's see. If we have PT, it's like 06:30 to 07:30, and then we don't have to be into work until 9. And then there's just normal days without working out. It's 06:30 show up time. So.
Wow. Well, we are thrilled that you were able to come. So do you not work this day? Is that it? Or it's different days of the week now that your schedule's changed?
Yeah. So now that this